It had been a long journey for Amara and Tunde. Their relationship, one that began in their university days, had withstood the test of time, distance, and personal challenges. The couple had spent the last few years building their lives in Lagos, carving out careers that would lead to financial success and stability. Amara had grown into a respected architect, working for one of the most prestigious firms in the city, while Tunde had climbed the corporate ladder, becoming a senior marketing executive for a growing tech company. They had everything they needed, except for one thing: peace of mind. It all started one fateful evening when Amara received a phone call from an unrecognized number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but something in her gut told her this call was important. Her heart raced as she brought the phone to her ear. "Amara," the voice on the other end said. It was deep, raspy, and unfamiliar. "I have something important to tell you about your husband." The words echoed in her mind, but she didn't answer immediately. "Tunde. What could possibly be wrong with him? I know you've been happy, but he's hiding something from you," the voice continued. "Something that will change everything. And if you want to save your relationship, you'll need to trust me." Amara's breath caught in her throat. The voice hung up before she could say anything. The silence in the room was deafening. Over the next few days, Amara tried to dismiss the voice as a prank or a miscommunication. She trusted Tunde with all her heart. But the unsettling feeling refused to leave. There was an unshakable instinct gnawing at her, pulling her towards something unknown. At dinner that night, she watched Tunde as he absent-mindedly scrolled through his phone, his attention elsewhere. He had always been a bit distracted, especially with work, but this was different. His usual charm and warmth had been replaced with an emotional coldness that left Amara wondering if something truly was amiss. "Are you okay?" Amara asked, placing her hand over his. Tunde looked at her, offering a forced smile. "I'm fine, babe. Just tired." But something about his response didn't sit well with her. Amara's thoughts raced. Could this be the start of what the mysterious caller had warned her about? The following days were filled with tension. Tunde's behavior grew more erratic. He'd cancel plans at the last minute, avoid eye contact during dinner, and when they did speak, his answers were vague and distant. Amara found herself growing more and more paranoid, wondering if there was someone else, if Tunde was involved in something shady. Finally, after weeks of building anxiety, Amara decided to confront him. They were in their living room one evening, Tunde sitting on the couch, and Amara pacing back and forth, her mind a whirlwind. "Tunde, there's something going on," Amara started, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know what it is, but I feel it. You've been distant, and I'm afraid you're hiding something from me." Tunde's face hardened as if the question itself was an accusation. He didn't say anything at first, but his eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape. "I'm not hiding anything," he said, finally meeting her gaze. "You're imagining things, Amara. I told you I'm just stressed with work." Amara took a deep breath. "Is it work, or is it something else?" Tunde stared at her for a moment before shaking his head. "It's nothing, okay? I just need some space, that's all." That was the breaking point. Amara couldn't take it anymore. She had trusted him blindly, but now she wasn't sure if she even knew the man sitting in front of her. "You've been hiding something from me, and I know it. I want the truth, Tunde." He stood up abruptly, his face flushed with frustration. "Fine, you want the truth. I've been trying to protect you." "Protect us? What do you mean?" Amara asked, her pulse quickening. Tunde took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly. "I've been involved in something that I shouldn't have. There are people in this city, dangerous people, who I've crossed. They've made it clear that if I don't comply with their demands, they'll hurt you. They'll hurt us both. Amora's heart dropped to her stomach as Tunde's words sank in. What kind of people, Tunde? Why didn't you tell me this before? I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it. But I was wrong, Tunde replied, his voice barely above a whisper. There's no way out of this now. They have control over everything, over my career, my finances, even my friends. Tears welled in Amora's eyes as she processed what he had just said. Tunde, the man she loved, had fallen into something far darker than she could have imagined. Who are these people? What do they want from you? They want me to use my connections at the company to funnel money into their operations. I've tried to distance myself, but they have leverage over me. And now, they know about you, he confessed, his face stricken with guilt. If I don't do what they say, they'll come after you, Amara. The weight of the truth hit Amara like a ton of bricks. Her life had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. She had always thought that the worst thing that could happen was a broken heart, but now, she was faced with the reality that their entire future was hanging by a thread. Days turned into weeks, and Tunde's paranoia grew. He kept a constant eye on their apartment, checking the locks on the doors and windows multiple times each night. He stopped leaving the house without Amara, terrified that someone would follow him. Amara, for the first time in her life, felt a deep fear that had nothing to do with uncertainty in her career or in their relationship. It was a fear for her life, for her safety. One night, as Amara sat by the window, watching the rain pour down, she couldn't take it anymore. She had to know the full truth. She needed to understand the extent of Tunde's involvement in the dangerous world he had fallen into. Tunde, she called out as he walked past her, pacing again. He stopped and turned toward her. What? I need to know everything, she said, her voice firm. I'm not going to live like this, not knowing the full truth. We're in this together, right? Tunde sighed and sat down next to her. He looked at her with a mixture of regret and sadness in his eyes. I wish I never got involved in the first place. But now, there's no going back. These people, if I don't do what they want, they'll destroy everything. I don't care what it takes. We'll fight it together, Amara said, her resolve hardening. I'm not losing you. And I'm not going to let them control us. But just as Tunde was about to respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his face going pale. It's them, he whispered. He answered the call reluctantly, holding the phone to his ear. Amora's heart raced as she listened to the one-sided conversation. Tunde's voice was shaky, and he kept glancing nervously at Amara as if trying to gauge her reaction. Yes, I'll do it, Tunde said finally. I'll make the transfer. But I want to see you face to face, all of you. The call ended abruptly, and Tunde turned to Amara, his face grave. They've given me one more chance. I have to do this, or they'll hurt you. Amara stood up, her heart pounding. We are done with running. This ends tonight. The final confrontation took place that night, in a dimly lit office building on the outskirts of the city. Tunde, Amara, and a group of determined allies faced off against the men who had held them hostage for far too long. The tension was palpable, but it was clear that no matter the cost, they would no longer be controlled. The battle for their freedom had begun. And though the path was uncertain, one thing was clear: Amara and Tunde were no longer willing to live in fear. Together, they would face whatever came next, no matter the consequences. But the question lingered in the air: would they escape unscathed, or was this just the beginning of a much darker journey? The standoff in the dimly lit office was nothing like Amara had imagined. The air was thick with tension as the shadows of menacing figures loomed over them. Tunde, standing beside her, was pale but resolute, the weight of his past choices bearing down on him. Let's end this, one of the men said, stepping forward. He was tall, his face a mask of indifference. His voice echoed in the vast, empty space. You've got the money. We have what we want. Amara could feel Tunde's body tense beside her, but she held his hand tightly, showing him that they were in this together. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about their future, their survival. I won't do it anymore, Tunde said suddenly, his voice shaking with raw emotion. Take your money. Take your threats. But I won't be your pawn any longer. The room fell silent. The man who had spoken took a step back, his eyes narrowing. It was clear they hadn't expected this defiance. You're not in control here, Tunde, the man sneered. You never were. Amara's heart pounded in her chest as the tension escalated. She knew that if they didn't act fast, everything they had worked for could be destroyed in an instant. But then, something shifted. Tunde's eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, Amara saw a man who had reclaimed his strength, who was ready to fight for them, for their life. I've made my decision, Tunde said firmly, his voice steady now. If I have to go down, I'll do it on my own terms. Before the men could react, Tunde pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking but determined. He made a call to a contact, someone from his company who had been secretly helping him gather intel on the criminal syndicate. The sound of police sirens began to echo in the distance. Chaos erupted as the men scrambled, but it was too late. The authorities had already closed in. In the end, the criminals were arrested, and Tunde and Amara's nightmare came to an end. The discovery wasn't just about the criminals, though, it was about the strength they found in each other, about the bond that had kept them together through it all. They had fought not just for their lives, but for their future. And no matter what came next, they knew they would face it together.